From Eyewitness News and your local weather experts, this is Eye on Hurricanes 2023.
This year we're heading into hurricane season with some new tools to help keep you safe. Good evening and thanks for watching our annual Eye on Hurricanes special. I'm Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin. Tonight, with the help of your local weather experts, I'll show you just how far forecasting has advanced since the days of Al Duckworth and Nash Roberts, plus some general tips to help keep you prepared and to avoid some of the dangers that storms bring. First tonight, I'll show you why we're finally shifting from a 5-day outlook to 7 days.
Something you may notice different this season is the tropical weather outlook. This product highlights the chance for tropical development given in a percentage in the next 2 and 5 days. This season, that forecast has been extended to 2 and now 7 days. And I'll be honest, I was and maybe still am a little skeptical. Forecasts are difficult, especially 7 days out, and especially for a developing tropical system. The formation stage is notoriously challenging for computer models to process. So what has changed at the National Hurricane Center? Upgrades, major upgrades.
So we have multiple different versions of those statistical tools as well. And then we have tools that are kind of combinations of those and give us optimal combinations of what all those things tell us. And the forecast team gets together and discusses all the pros and cons of each one of those tools. And we come to a consensus among myself, people from the Hurricane Center, and people from the Meteorological Laboratory for the Atlantic Ocean.
This graph shows the tropical weather outlook for the past 3 years with the percent chance of developing down at the bottom and the percent time they verified. Note this does include a 7-day forecast, as this was back in the experimental stage. Now the solid black line in the middle would represent a perfect forecast. In other words, 30% chance of development, 30% of the time it verifies. 50% development, 50% chance it verifies, and so on. So note that all of the forecasts from the National Hurricanes are actually fall above the perfect line, meaning they tend to be a little bit more conservative with their outlook. But what is fascinating is when you look at the 5 and 7 day forecasts and their verifications, they're almost exactly the same. And it's because of this, the National Hurricane Center feels confident in beginning a 7-day tropical outlook. We'll see how it verifies this season. Our smartphone app is a great tool to help you prepare for storms and stay connected as they arrive. You can use it to stream our live coverage and even share eyewitness photos and videos with us. Just search your phone's app store to download your copy for free. Before we get to our seasonal forecast, something to note. We actually had our first storm of the 2023 season. It was a subtropical storm that developed back in mid-January. It formed near the Canadian Maritimes. Now, it will not receive a name, so Arlene will still be used. However, if the first storm of the season were to become a tropical depression, in other words, it doesn't form just as a tropical storm, a named storm, it would actually be the first classification would be TD number 2. So that is the first storm of the season. However, as I said, Arlene is not yet been used. Brett, Cindy, Don, Emily, Franklin, and Gert will be the first of our names for this coming season. So what is the forecast? A lot of folks are asking. Basically, the consensus is an either at average or maybe slightly above average. Now, earlier forecasts were calling for a strong El Nino, and thus the forecast would have been below average. So why the change? Well, here's what an El Nino does. Basically, it creates strong wind shear, meaning it is difficult for storms to form right over what we call the main development region, so across the Caribbean and the tropical Atlantic. However, something to note for us is that the strong wind shear really doesn't play a role in what we call homegrown storms. In other words, storms that would develop in the Gulf of Mexico or in the Caribbean, northwestern Caribbean, or into the Atlantic. Other kind of side of that is what could allow for more development this season. Well, the Atlantic across that main development is very warm. So could this offset the strong wind shear of El Nino? Right now, the trend is for a strong El Nino, and it may be that that is able to overtake these strong subsurface or sea surface temperatures. So what the weather forecasters do when looking at how to make that type of forecast for a season is that they look at past seasons with similar conditions. So similar to the 2023 season with regards to an El Nino and also those sea surface temperatures. And these are the years that saw similar setup to that season. Now, back in 1969, it was actually above average, and a noteworthy storm was Camille. Back in 2002, we actually had 12 4 and 2, so it was below average. However, you may remember that season we had Lily and Isidore, so a couple of noteworthy storms. 2004, just about average. However, we had Charlie, Francis, and Ivan. And then in 2012, we had above average, but Sandy and Isaac. Notice, 4 of the 8 seasons had noteworthy, and the majority of those seasons saw below average activity. So just looking at average, it would be more likely to see us to stay below average, especially considering a strong El Nino. However, as we always say, it only takes one. High winds and storm surge are some of the top hazards that come to mind when a storm threatens, but we sometimes forget about all the things that can happen before or after a storm. And those are just as dangerous as wind and water. Your local weather expert, Alexandra Cranford, has more.
When a hurricane approaches, the big dangers we tend to focus on are violent winds, torrential downpours, and dangerous storm surge. But those are just the direct threats. There are many more storm-related hazards that happen before or especially after a storm, and they can be just as deadly.
In the last 10 years, we've seen that the number of after the storm deaths has pretty much been about equal to the people that are dying directly from the forces of the storm itself.
In 2022, Hurricane Ian slammed into Florida's southwest coast. There were a total of 156 storm-related deaths, and more than half of those were from indirect causes. Not wind and water, but things like heart attacks, falling from ladders or roofs during storm prep or cleanup, and car crashes.
You can have power outages, so you might not have traffic lights in place, you might not have stop signs in place, and you can result in accidents in that way.
Lots of after-storm deaths are related to power outages, like electrocution from downed power lines, falling and getting hurt in a dark house after power goes out, house fires from accidents with things like candles, and carbon monoxide poisoning from using generators the wrong way.
The facts of a portable generator is they need to be more than 20 feet away from the home. The facts are they need to be in a good operable condition. The facts are they need to be away from any openings in the structure, any windows, any doors.
One good piece of news from Hurricane Ian, there were 0 carbon monoxide deaths, which could be a sign people are getting more careful about using generators. Even evacuating comes with dangers. Evacuations were responsible for 13% of indirect deaths over 5 decades, according to a National Hurricane Center report. That report also showed a majority of indirect storm death victims were male, and except in cases of car crashes, they tend to be older.
The indirect or after the storm fatalities disproportionately affect older folks, especially age 60 and over, people that may have more medical issues, people that are more susceptible to widespread power outages.
So when a storm gets close, and if you're deciding whether to evacuate, it's good to consider not just wind and surge, but all the dangers that can be deadly. For Eye on Hurricanes, meteorologist Alexandra Cranford.
Another thing to consider is that you might not have access to medical care after a storm. If you have a heart attack or other emergency, it could take hours to get to an ambulance or to get to a hospital. Now that we've gone over some of the upgrades for this upcoming storm season, we're looking back at how we used to track hurricanes. Channel 4 is also celebrating our 65th anniversary, and coming up, we take you back to the days of Al Duckworth and Nash Roberts to really give you an idea of how much forecasting has advanced since the 60s. Channel 4 has been on the air for 65 years now, and that's a whole lot of hurricane seasons. Eyewitness News anchor Bill Elder takes us back in time for a discussion with legendary meteorologist Nash Roberts.
The ability to gather data about hurricanes has increased tremendously in recent years. Satellites help us pinpoint their location. Weather buoys and hurricane hunters can measure their wind speed and barometric pressure. As yet, no one can make long-range forecasts that says where a hurricane is going to hit. But as a storm bears closer, the person who most consistently comes the closest to predicting its landfall is Nash Roberts.
But that Mississippi Gulf Coast could, anywhere from Gulfport over to Pascagoula, could be in the target area.
From his office in a century-old French Quarter building, Nash takes note of the many possible storm tracks proposed by National Hurricane Center computers, but he does not rely on the computer himself.
I plot every reconnaissance report and completely analyze it. Every ship report, every buoy report, all the satellite data. In other words, we do hourly plotting. We just plot, and analyze.
Nash, how many elements are we talking about now, and what it takes for you to come up with the final decision on where this storm is going?
What it takes is, number one, to understand the physics of the storm to begin with, the mechanics of what's going on in there. And then the second thing is you have to see what's happening in the environment to steer it, whether it be the winds aloft or whether it be a blocking high, the rotation of the earth, whatever it is. Once you have a handle on what's making it move in a certain direction, half the job is done. Then you have to look downstream to see if there's anything going to change the emphasis of a particular type of steering.
Nash applied those 3 steps to his prediction on Hurricane George.
In the case of George, the thing that turned out to be the basic steering mechanism is this diagram here. That is the upper high pressure system, and the storm moves along the bottom of that ridge. And I had to decide when this ridge was going to quit moving west and allow the storm to turn north. But in the initial turn, it turned right for New Orleans. But I knew that as it progressed further north, the tendency is due to the deflective force of the earth was to turn it more north. And eventually, when it got to a certain latitude, it was going to run into the bottom of the westerlies. And that's made me sure that it was not going to make New Orleans.
I could listen to him talk for hours. There are a number of exciting new developments and tools to make forecasting more accurate, but nothing can outdo your local weather experts and the ways that we interpret all of that information. Peyton Malone has more.
In fact, it had moved very little since,
For generations, WWL-TV has tracked every storm that threatens our area. From the beginnings with Al Duckworth to the legendary Nash Roberts and everyone in between and after, if you've been watching Channel 4 for any time, you know how much forecasting has changed and just how different things look now.
Let's rewind it back to the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Meteorologists did things a lot different back then. Take, for example, these maps you see here. These are maps that Nash Roberts and his forecasters put together every single day, hand analysis with their pencils. They would take this analysis and create the forecast that you would see on TV. And of course, you would see Nash every night with his marker giving you the forecast without a computer. Now, fast forward to 2023. We have everything you could ever ask for. Computers, all the graphics you could imagine, and some of the best models we've ever had. With all that, the forecasts, they've never been better.
In fact, when you look at the data, a 5-day forecast today in 2023 is just as accurate as a 2-day forecast was just 25 years ago. Brian McNulty, Senior Research Associate at the University of Miami, explains advancements in our weather models have played a big role in that. But it's more than just the models. They wouldn't be as polished or accurate without our new satellites.
As far as what we've got in space to observe hurricanes, they have certainly improved too. I mean, you go back to the 1960s, they basically were just taking a quick look at, here's the clouds. We get way more than just what the clouds look like now. And all of that goes into the hurricane models as well.
The easiest way to visualize how far our forecasts have come is to simply look at the cone. And remember, the cone is a representation of how accurate the National Hurricane Center has been. If the Hurricane Center struggles with accuracy, the cone grows in size. If they have a good forecast, the cone will shrink in size. Take a look at 2005's cone. This is a 3-day forecast. Look how giant the cone of uncertainty is, extending 400 miles from edge to edge. Now, if you compare that to 2023, you can see just how far our forecasts have come. They become more accurate, so the forecast cone has been shrinking in size and now extends only 200 miles from edge to edge.
The improvements are decreasing with time. So what I mean by that is 20 to 30 years ago, you might have had a more impressive reduction in track errors or intensity errors. But lately, like the last 5 to 10 years, it's getting really hard to make noteworthy improvements.
What was going to really start helping
But experts continue to do research to find the best ways to improve forecasts. Some things that could potentially be the future of hurricane forecasting are already in the works. Uncrewed aircraft and sail drones can take measurements where no crewed aircraft can currently go.
And then the other thing that's already happening too, and just beginning to happen, is using our artificial intelligence. That's coming into play in a lot of things. Happens that it's also coming into play in hurricane intensity forecasting. And like I said, that's kind of at its infancy now, but it's working its way in there. So who knows where that's going to be in 5 to 10 years.
And as forecasts continue to improve, experts have been looking at better ways to communicate the impacts of a storm. We've been using the 5-day cone for years now, but future plans could change that. The National Hurricane Center is currently testing 6 and even 7-day forecasts.
We're seeing mixed skill with that. We want to bring those errors down a little bit, and we're also trying to figure out how will we communicate that. Is it just adding another point or two to the cone, or is it finding another way to communicate that information with, again, maybe a risk area map that shows where that storm could be without necessarily relying on that cone product.
No matter what decade or advancements we've seen in meteorology, one thing remains true today, just like it did when Nash Roberts was giving you the latest hurricane forecast.
You never want to rely on a computer model as the answer, because they aren't. Turns out the most accurate answer is almost always a smart blending of all the inputs. And that's why, we still have human forecasters.
I'm meteorologist Peyton Malone.
The peak of the season typically arrives in early September, but there is no reason to delay your storm preps another day. Coming up, we have some helpful reminders on what to do right now so you can start this hurricane season on the right foot. Many of us have our own hurricane checklist, but after so many seasons getting prepared year after year, it can be easy to forget some of those tips. Devin Bartolotta walks us through some things to do right now.
We've all been stuck in the dark as a tropical system knocks out power to southeast Louisiana. And you're asking yourself, where did I put those batteries again? Here is a short list of things that you can do to help prepare yourself a little bit more for hurricane season. First, stock up on food and water. Now, you should have a 3-day supply. That is 3 of these per person in your household. It's also smart to have a 3-day supply of non-perishable foods. That can be anything from canned fruits and vegetables to soups to bars that do not need to be refrigerated. And as far as your refrigerator and your freezer go, you can actually pop some of these waters in the freezer to keep what's in there colder longer. Next, you're going to want to double check that everything you need is in your emergency kit. Now that includes a first aid kit, a solar powered or hand crank weather radio, emergency candles, a flashlight with extra batteries, and of course a utility tool just in case you need to turn off any utilities or fix anything. And if you're going to evacuate, make sure you have enough of your medications and any pets' medications on you, plus any important family documents. Next, do not forget to fill your gas cans, whether it's for a generator or a chainsaw or just to have some to put in your car after a storm. It's a good idea to have some on hand. You might remember after Hurricane Ida, with the power out and gas stations closed across the city, some people waited in line for gas for as long as 4 hours. Make sure you've got your game plan in place as well. That should include where you're going to go if you're going to evacuate, who is going with you, and where your pets are going to go. You should also write down where the closest shelter of last resort is to your home. If you're someone who needs help evacuating, make sure your information is updated with your parish. And as far as information goes, you should be staying up to date on what is happening and what the forecast is for your area. We'll help you with that one every step of the way.
Now an update on some of the largest pieces of our storm protection system. Crews have tested the massive sector gate at the Gulf Intracoastal Waterway in Plaquemines Parish. They also turned on the pumps that move water out of the Algiers and Harvey canals.
Seeing it all come together was Hurricane Ida, and knowing that the system works, that was the biggest test that the system's ever had, and it passed with flying colors. Hopefully we have a quiet hurricane season again, but if we don't, then we're ready.
The Southeast Louisiana Flood Protection Authority West operates a total of 47 miles of floodgates and levees that protect about 210,000 people. At the London Avenue Canal, the Army Corps of Engineers is adding temporary pumps after discovering corrosion. The pumps were supposed to last about 35 years. The corrosion was discovered just after 5. Officials have been providing updates on social media. One of the 6 pumps at London Avenue is offline for repairs. That's the one shown in red. There's 1 pump offline for inspection at the 17th Street Canal right now. It's the one in yellow. And all 3 pumps have been inspected and are ready to go at Orleans Avenue. Thanks for watching our Eye on Hurricane special. Be sure to download our free smartphone app to stay connected. And as you prepare for this hurricane season, be sure to check on your neighbors as well. From all of us here at Channel 4, stay safe and have a great night.